Alice McKenzie, and with my colleague Wes Allen, I co-direct the Perkins Center for Preaching Excellence at SMU. And we have a series of interviews we call Must-Read Classics, in which we interview or learn about a book that's several decades old, but is still valuable for preachers. Today I have Dr. Lisa Davison with me today, and I'll say a little more about her in a bit. But she and I are going to talk about a classic work in feminist biblical criticism called Texts of Terror. So let's think about ways that we can appropriate this for today. So thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. Davison.
Thank you.
And I'll give you a more flowery introduction in a few moments.
Okay.
So our focus today is on the book Texts of Terror, which has as a subtitle Literary Feminist Readings of Biblical Narratives. And this is a seminal work in feminist biblical studies that was originally the 1982 Lyman Beecher Lectures by Phyllis Trible. Phyllis Trible was an internationally recognized biblical scholar and rhetorical critic, and was the Baldwin Professor Emerita of Sacred Literature at Union Theological Seminary in New York for many years. It's hard to say enough about her contributions over the years. She passed away just this past October 2025. And I'm holding in my hands the 40th year edition of Texts of Terror, Literary Feminist Readings of Biblical Narratives. Now that defines a classic, doesn't it? 40-year anniversary. And it's already highlighted once again, as was my former copy. But Dr. Trible made a tremendous contribution with this work, which we'll talk about in a few moments. Now, as for our guest, Dr. Lisa Davison, I couldn't really think of anyone better to come on and discuss this book with, because you also are a feminist literary critic and scholar of the Hebrew Bible. Dr. Davison is the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Dean at Phillips Theological Seminary in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where she is the Johnnie Cadieux Professor of Hebrew Bible. Did I pronounce that right?
It's Cadieux, but that's close enough.
I was using my high school French. Okay.
Yes.
So Dr. Davison has written Preaching Women in the Bible in 2006, and more recently, More Than a Womb, Child-Free Women in the Hebrew Bible as Agents of the Holy, 2022. And in that book, she lifts up women of the Hebrew Bible who, regardless of their fertility or infertility, they made a contribution that was crucial to the ongoing history of Israel, past, present, and future. So welcome, Dr. Davison, and I thought you'd be the perfect person, and I appreciate your making time to talk with me a little bit today. So
thank you.
Sure. Maybe we jump in then first to talk a little bit about the book. The book is as Phyllis Trible says, it's 4 sad stories. It's 4 horrific stories of gender-based violence in the Bible, and they are arranged by Dr. Trible in heightened dramatic sequence, like from horrible to more horrible. The first is the rejection of Hagar in Genesis 16, then the rape of Tamar, daughter of David, in 2 Samuel 13, and then the dismemberment of an unnamed, she doesn't get a name, concubine in Judges 19, and then a story of sacrifice, Jephthah's daughter, in Judges 11. So it just goes from bad to worse to worse.
Yes.
So you want to maybe talk a bit about how you first came into contact with the book and its initial impact on you?
Sure. I actually was a student of Dr. Trible, Dr. Tony Craven, who was my Hebrew Bible professor and mentor at Bright Divinity School, studied with Phyllis Trible. So I had been aware of her work during my seminary career. But the book, Texts of Terror, I first engaged with it in my PhD studies. I was working on a story that's in that book, Jephthah's daughter, and it was the work you had to read before you could ever talk about Jephthah's daughter. And then since that time, I have taught numerous courses on women in the Hebrew Bible. And I always make certain that we talk about these texts of terror, looking both at how they have been used throughout the centuries to cause more harm, and then also looking at them to talk about the female characters and the courage and strength and other characteristics that we can find if we just read close enough. The story doesn't want us to read that closely.
No.
The story wants us to pay attention to the male actors and to see these male actors as somehow admirable. You know, Jephthah shows up in the New Testament as a righteous person, and everybody who's read the story of Jephthah's daughter ends up thinking, why on earth did he make that list? No, and even of some of our favored people, Abraham. I mean, the story of Hagar does not make Abraham or Sarah look very good. And so sometimes what I get from students is helping them deconstruct the narratives that they've learned about these texts and these women.
Sometimes are they shocked to even find these stories in the Bible?
Yes, they are. Most of them have not read them, particularly Jephthah's daughter and the Levite's concubine, or even Tamar. They'll know a bit about Hagar, but not Hagar's story. They only know Sarah and Abraham's story. Yeah. And the other piece that I have picked up on since I was first reading Texts of Terror is with Hagar. When she's in the wilderness, the Holy makes a covenant with her about offspring so numerous you can't count. That is very much similar to what the covenant was with Sarah and Abraham and their descendants. So there's also that counter reading where you're reading against the grain and you see that suddenly at least the Holy in this story doesn't forget Hagar, but finds her in the wilderness. So that's my kind of way of playing with, it's a horrible story and I'm not going to excuse anybody, but there are also some close things you can pick up on if you're paying attention to Hagar and her position in the story.
So there is some, I know that Phyllis Trible didn't want to rescue these stories with the resurrection or pretty them up in any way, but she does find some redemptive strands through it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And there's no real way to rescue. I mean, for instance, the chapter on Jephthah's daughter, so much of the history of interpretation has tried to make it better. Suggesting that she was dedicated as like a Vestal virgin and that he never sacrificed her, even though it says very clearly that he did according to his vow, which was to offer up that person in a burnt offering to God. So that those kinds of trying to save the story, we're not going to have any part of. It's a sad, horrible story. And I took the story of Jephthah's daughter and the story of the near sacrifice of Isaac and laid them side by side, asking, where is God that stopping Jephthah? Or I took Saul's son, Jonathan, who was going to be put to death, but the people stopped that from happening. And I'm like, where is the community in Jephthah's daughter's story? So helping us to see these parallel stories, somehow the female character is completely abandoned.
Right. Well, I felt it was very moving when Phyllis Trible makes the sort of the allegory of how feminists approached a text with Jacob struggling with the man all night in Genesis, and she says that they're struggling with demons in the dark, but no compassionate God to save.
That's right.
And you walk away with a limp. So
yes,
I thought that was a very something preachers could really grab onto as they look at things in this new and more uncomfortable way. What do you think makes this book particularly crucial for preachers?
Well, for one thing, it breaks you out of the lectionary's attempt to either ignore these stories or to focus on male characters. and not tell the sad part or look at the female character's perspective. So if nothing else, that's something that preachers need sometimes, is to say there are some other texts that aren't here in the lectionary that I need to address.
Right.
The other thing I often tell my students is that these difficult texts are in the Hebrew Bible. If we don't deal with them, then somebody else will deal with them in a way that's probably not ethical or helpful.
Right.
And so if we abandon them because they're too difficult to talk about, we think, then everyone else out there is left to an interpretation that we wouldn't think was helpful or even accurate to the text itself.
Right.
So that's another thing. I think preachers have to tackle that. Yeah. Difficult texts you can't shy away from.
I was looking in the opening to this, and there were several comments about our testimonies to the book and what it has meant. And one of the recurring themes is that it helps us to identify gender-based violence in the Bible, so that the Bible can be a mirror for gender-based violence today. So
yes,
yeah.
As another thing I like to tell my students is not every story in the Hebrew Bible was written as a go and do likewise story.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Some of these stories, especially these four, I think are meant to confront us and cause us to look around and see who are the Hagars in our society, who is the Levite's concubine that's being torn apart because of misplaced honor and misplaced desire for power. And so that these four stories to me also hold the mirror up to us.
Right.
And help us call out those places in our society that it may not look exactly like the story, but it certainly is similar to the gender-based violence and the neglect and abuse that we see all around us today.
Right. So with all of that, what would we say is maybe like a strand of hope from these sad stories? That might be a good to wrap up. Where is there hope?
Well, I mentioned my hope with Hagar, that she gets a covenant.
Right.
And indeed, she finds a husband, a wife for her son. Tamar, the rape of Tamar is really difficult to find any line of hope, or the concubine. But in Jephthah's daughter, I think I see a theme that helps with all of them. And the redeeming part of that story of Jephthah's daughter are the daughters who roam the hills with her. And then it says every year they remembered her.
Yes.
And that's the hope for me, is if we keep reading these stories, if we keep preaching these stories, if we keep drawing attention to how our society may be repeating the same mistakes.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me today, talking about this seminal book, this classic Texts of Terror, and also I wanted to call attention to your own book, which I think preachers would definitely benefit from. More Than a Womb, Child-Free Women in the Hebrew Bible as Agents of the Holy. So thanks so much for your time. And
thank you.
Appreciate it.